About 10 years ago, one of the biggest names in horror was the Slender Man. Fast forward to today and you probably either hate him or really don't care. Well, in this video I wanted to think back to a simpler time, when I was in 7th grade and my friends told me to check out this random Swedish YouTuber and his gameplays of this thing called Slender the 8 Pages. Today I'll see if it still holds up and if my mind towards the game has changed significantly. Now, in case you don't remember or if you've never actually played it yourself, here's a quick recap. You play as a person stuck in a forest. It's the middle of the night and you only have a flashlight. It seems like you're alone, but after walking around for some time, you find a note taped to a tree, or a truck or some other notable landmark. You find out that you need to locate 8 pages total in order to win. Slowly but surely, the music gets more intense, the fog gets thicker, and you experience something similar to TV static on the screen. Eventually, you turn a corner or look behind you only to see the Slender Man just standing there staring at you. And if you look long enough, you die by having him flash in front of your face. It's kind of hard to believe that this game was as popular as it was, considering it was really easy to beat the game and there wasn't even anything that scary. The Slender Man was this figure that could teleport around but not actually walk towards you. So whenever you see him, just turn around. Yes, it's that simple. You don't even have to run. There's no epic chase, you just need to not look at him. It's funny to rewatch gameplays of people playing it back then and freaking out over just seeing the Slender Man way off in the distance. Nothing even happened. I don't even think we really understood the gameplay despite how simplistic it was.
I don't see him.
Oh! Oh! What are you doing? You're running at him. Now, of course, this game can't compare to the intense chases of games like Outlast, but it did do something very differently than other horror games at the time. I mean, if you look at what were considered popular horror games back then, you'll see titles like Resident Evil 6, Dead Island, or Fear. And most of these games weren't really that scary and focused much more on the action elements than just horror. So it's relatively easy to see the appeal of a game like Slender. First of all, the barrier of entry is so much lower because the controls are really easy and the game is free. On top of that, the game focuses on building an effective atmosphere rather than giving you a gun and placing you in a high-octane action scenario, like every other game would. That's one aspect of the game that I actually still like, the simplicity. Horror works best in my opinion if things are kept simple. The common trend for games is to make everything bigger and more intense. Especially in sequels, we always see bigger budgets and therefore more of everything. But some of the scariest things work best in a more limited environment, and Slender is a great example of that in my opinion. Now, I think something that people might initially want to critique looking back at it today is the low quality of the game. And yes, it's no secret, the game looks like a piece of shit. It just does. However, I think the low quality doesn't take away from the game at all, and maybe even makes it more effective. We've talked about this a number of times on the channel, but you don't always need or even want full HDR 4K with ray tracing in a horror experience. Some of the scariest movies or games even decrease the quality significantly on purpose just to make it more suspenseful. Just look at something like Lake Mungo or Outlast. And I gotta say that while replaying Slender the 8 Pages, I did get a little bit more scared than I thought. At first I thought I'd be strolling through the level easily, but it's actually still kind of scary, and the sound design especially is very effective. But before I give the game too much credit, I have to address the elephant in the room, and that is that this game is incredibly difficult because like 80% of the screen is pure blackness. Everything is dark. Not like in an atmospheric way, it's just completely black and you can't see where you're going or what the hell is even going on, which makes it really annoying after about 3 minutes. This surprisingly was also an issue with Slender the Arrival as well as the 2018 movie. I don't know what it is about Slender, but they have got to turn up the brightness at least a little bit. I mean, when the only thing you see is a tiny light cone that can barely illuminate what is 20 feet in front of you, it gets less scary and more frustrating really quickly. Anyway, on my first run, I was able to collect like 5 pages before I got so lost in the woods and it became impossible to orient myself, and the Slender Man eventually came up from behind and grabbed my ass. In the middle of the game, you often look around, but all you see is trees that look the same, and you completely forget where you even came from. This is another aspect of the game I surprisingly really enjoyed. It gets really difficult to make your way around the map because so much of it looks the same. However, this greatly adds to the creepy factor because being lost in the woods with some monster chasing you is scary. This also reveals the unexpected depth of the game. It is really simple on the surface, but there's a learning curve to it, and navigating the map and developing a good route to take to increase your odds of winning does take some skill. Does it hold up today? For me personally, it's just too easy, and the way the Slender Man kills you doesn't make any sense to me. But again, it's not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. When I got the idea of making this video, I thought I'd laugh at how bad it was, kind of like how some of you guys do at my videos, but it was nowhere near as bad as I remember, so I'd give it a solid middle of the road sort of ranking. But where the hell did this game even come from? This was another thing I never actually knew. I should have probably touched on this earlier, but I wanted to jump right into the game first, so I know the structure here might not be the greatest. So the game is actually based on a creepypasta that was created by an entirely different person. I remember thinking that the creepypasta either came with the game or slightly afterwards, but no, it actually came before. The Slender Man creepypasta originated from some edited pictures that were created as part of a competition where the contestants should create paranormal images. One of the contestants, Eric Knudsen, decided to Photoshop some old photos and added a tall man in a suit with no face. These pictures went viral, and after that the story slowly expanded into what we have today. There's no official story, however, because there wasn't one author. Instead, many different people contributed by writing their own creepy stories, which slowly built up the larger mythos of Slender Man. But overall, the story goes something like this. The Slender Man is a tall figure with tentacles coming out of his back, and he abducts people, mostly children in abandoned locations. This is why the forest setting fits so well. If you walk away from him, you should be fine, but if you look back, you seemingly go into some sort of trance and walk towards him. You can also get the Slender sickness, where he's able to make you commit evil acts on his behalf. Now, there were actually people who thought it was real because the photos didn't look that bad. Personally, I thought the quality of the photoshops were great. I just couldn't imagine the Slender Man stopping in the middle of the woods with the child he's abducting in order to let a stranger take a picture of him. That just seems to go against everything he stands for. Posing for a picture? What? Anyway, back in the day, I was really scared of the Slender Man too. I was like 12 or 13 years old at the time. Perfect age for the Slender Man to abduct me. Now in the winter, it would get dark really early, and I would spend a few extra hours at school. Then I would go home, and there was a little stretch of forest that served as a shortcut. And most of the time, I wouldn't take it because I thought, well, I don't want the Slender Man to diddle my ass. But sometimes I had to pee really bad, so I would take it anyway. And I really hated it. I would slowly walk in with a flashlight from my phone, but the path was so long and dark that even if you shined the flashlight straight ahead, it would still be pitch black. Then every time after I'm like a third of the way in, I'd hear a twig snap or some weird noise a few feet behind me. At this point, I'm in too deep to turn back, so I'd start sprinting through the forest, and it was always the greatest relief when I made it out the other end without getting murdered. Looking back, I'm surprised that I didn't trip over one of the 5 million roots sticking out or the small holes in the path. If I would have tripped even once, and it was really dark so that was a possibility, that would have been much more dangerous than encountering the Slender Man. But even though the creepypasta existed before, it was really only after the games that it became so insanely popular. This is clearly visible if you take a look at the Google Trends graph, which really takes off around the time of the release of the game, while having barely any volume comparatively when the creepypasta started. Not long after, it just went completely out of control, with him appearing in every form of media. And not so long after that, we all kind of got tired of it. I think the Slender story sort of shows the insane power the internet can have, but also the consequences. Yes, with sites like YouTube, Reddit, and Twitter, new and great things can get insanely popular in a really short amount of time. But they can also become so hyped up that even after a few months or even just weeks, you're already tired of it. You see it everywhere, and not soon after, you want something new. And very quickly, that thing that everyone was talking about slowly fades away, only to become forgotten. In case you want to know what happened to either one of the guys, Eric Knudsen, who made the pictures, or Mark Hadley, who made the game, they were both involved in the game Slender: The Arrival. But other than that, you can't really find that much on them. It was really fun to look back and see how such a simple game made in the Unity engine created such an incredibly well-known horror icon. That's another reason why I love horror. You don't need an incredibly high budget or crazy visual effects with realistic graphics. If you have the right idea, you might just create something amazing.